one of the great tragedies of American history is that NATO was not dissolved. And NATO could not exist. It had this enormous bureaucracy of very highly paid people, all of these military think tanks, and it was important to create the illusion that the new Russian Federation was just a generic substitute for the old Soviet Union. They were both the same types of countries, and yet they were radically different. They were dramatically different, and most importantly, they represented no external threat whatsoever. The Federation of Russia bears little resemblance to the Soviet Union, which I fought against. I was actually part of the NATO forces when I was stationed in West Germany. And I was prepared to fight if Germany were attacked. So it's unfortunate. Very few people, I'm sure it's the same in China, Russia, India, wherever. Ordinary people don't understand foreign affairs. Often we're talking about countries, and most people couldn't find Taiwan on the map. They couldn't find Ukraine on the map. It's sort of an intellectual elite that understands matters of foreign policy. And so it makes it very easy for propaganda to move and to shift public opinion. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where we are today. But I did want to interject this. I say this as someone who's very much wants American people to have the best in this world, and at the same time, I want to see people in China and in Russia and in Ukraine do better.
In many of your analysis on the Ukraine crisis, you've criticized the United States' role, you've criticized the NATO's role, and because of the analysis you gave, you've been labeled as a Russian propagandist or information terrorist by the Ukrainian government. But as you mentioned earlier in this interview, you've served for 31 years in the U.S. Marine and U.S. Army. You were wounded and bled for this country. You are a patriotic American. So calling you a Russian propagandist is absurd. But I'm also wondering why someone like you, who worked in a very high position in the U.S. government, decided to come out to say other views that are probably deemed as very unpleasant to the government or probably even to the general public.
My concern is with the people. I guess one of the advantages that I have, I don't want anything. I don't want money. I don't want position. I don't want power. But I care very deeply about the future of my children, my grandchildren, and everyone's children and grandchildren. I think the number one thing, I want to avoid a nuclear war. We've never been closer to nuclear war than we are today. Now, when I say today, probably we were a little bit closer to nuclear war 3 months ago. We were very, very close to nuclear war. Today, a little less so, partly because of interviews like we're conducting right now. It's starting to diffuse some of the war energy on the deep state side. But so my interest is in the people. First, the American people. I want to see the American people do better. But at the same time, there was an incident when I was fighting in Vietnam. One night we went out on patrol, and we circled around behind a hamlet. There was a platoon of Viet Cong soldiers who had entered the village and raised the flag because it was sort of a symbol. We're coming after you, because we were up on this ridge line and they were beginning to gather on all sides. And so I went around in the dark of night with this blocking force. And then in the very early morning hours, another platoon was to attack and drive them into our guns. And so I'm sitting in the darkness, peering and straining to see what's out there. And all of a sudden, a figure came through the darkness. And I peered and I looked, and it was an old woman, an ancient woman, and she was hobbling out, and she was going to the bathroom out in the jungle. And I looked at my radium-dialed wristwatch to see, and H hour, the hour of the attack, was in 5 minutes. And so I thought to myself, this isn't going to happen. I knew the woman would die. She was in this firing zone where all of the guns crisscrossed, and nothing out there would live once the guns opened up. And so I told my radio man, I said, pass the line down, pass the word down the line that not to shoot. I'm going in. And then I passed the word down the other way. And so I got up and I began to very quickly walk towards the woman, who was probably 50 yards away. And my radio man, Corporal Smith, he joined me. He got up and we went out. We got to the woman. It was pitch black. And of course, she's terrified. And so she hitched up her pants and she tried to begin hobbling away. We had no time to argue with her, and she was very frail. So I lifted her with my right arm and Smitty with his left arm. And we began quickly walking back to our lines. And as we did, a sentry spotted us and he fired a rifle grenade. And those grenades go up and then down. So it takes a few moments before it hits and explodes. And as soon as we heard it go off, we ran and we just plunged through the jungle, and we got to the edge of the rice paddy, which was all covered with water and mud. And we leaped through the air with the old lady flying like a rag doll through the air. And we hit face down in the mud and the water. And the grenade exploded about 3 feet from us, but we were down, and it hit up on the rice paddy dike. So neither of us were hurt. The lady wasn't hurt. And then at that moment, that triggered the attack, and the valley echoed with gunfire then for the next 20 minutes, and until the platoon, the Viet Cong platoon, was annihilated. Now, what was it that caused me to take a tremendous risk of my own life for a woman whose life expectancy might have been 2 years? She was an old lady. She had no money. She was in poverty. When she went to the bathroom, she went out in the bushes. She lived in a thatched hut. But to me, justice is a very important thing. I have a very keen sense of justice, and I don't like to see innocent people hurt. I will tell you, I controlled the dropping of bombs. I probably dropped perhaps more bombs than any Marine during the Vietnam War. Now, when I say drop them, I ordered them to be dropped. And I'm sure there were many innocent people who got caught in all of that. So I was not an unduly soft-hearted person. I was a very strong Marine, but when it came down to the deliberate taking of an innocent life, I would do a great deal to avoid it, even if it meant that I might die in the process. Perhaps I have a different psychology. I know that I have a different psychology than many people do, but that's where I'm coming from. And I think many people that know me respect that. And that is why I, to some extent, maybe I'm sort of a fair broker. I see things from both sides and try to be just in dealing with both sides. At the same time, protecting the interests of the American people.